In this video, I want to have a look at sample space when we're talking about probability. So if we're asked to list the sample space, we need to have some sort of structured way of listing all of the possible outcomes of that event. So there's three main ways we can do it. One is just simply a list, or we could draw a tree diagram, or we could draw up our results, our possible outcomes in a table. So let's have a look at what those look like. So our first example, we're going to have a look at two coins being flipped. So if we're flipping two coins, because it's a fairly simple situation, we don't have too many outcomes, we could just list them. So we could get heads on the first coin and tails on the second. We could get tails on the first coin and heads on the second. Or we could get heads on both or tails on both. So that there is what it looks like if we just list our outcomes. If we have a look at that same situation, but instead we draw a tree diagram. So a tree diagram has branches for each step of our event. So for our first coin flipping, we could have heads or tails. You just need to make sure that each stage, all the events line up, or the outcomes line up. So this is for our first coin. For our second coin, we could get heads or tails, and we could get heads or tails. So then we can read along our branches to figure out all our possible outcomes. So if we read along this branch first, we could have heads and heads. If we read up here and then down, we could have heads and tails. If we look down and then up, we could have tails and heads, and down and along the bottom, we could have tails and tails. So we still end up with those four outcomes. It's just a different method of getting there. If we have a look at a different situation, let's have a look at flipping rolling two dice, and we're going to add the numbers that we get together. So for this one, if we tried to do a tree diagram, because there's 6 outcomes at each stage, because there's 6 numbers on a die, our tree diagram would get pretty messy. If we try and do a list, it's probably pretty easy to get confused and lost as to where we're up to. So a table is going to help us systematically do it in a way that's not going to get too messy. So we're going to roll 2 dice, and we want their sum. So we're going to draw up a table. Have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on our first die, and on our second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we can go through and fill in our sums. So if we add the two numbers together, we'd get 2, 3, 4, because we're adding 3 and 1. 4 and 1 gives 5, 6, 7, and we can fill in that whole table. All right, so that's a systematic way of writing all of those outcomes, so listing our sample space. So all three of these things have advantages and disadvantages. Lists are sometimes just the easiest way to go, but because it's not very systematic, it's really easy to miss outcomes. A tree diagram is systematic, but it can get messy if there's too many possibilities on each branch. And tables are good for when we've only got 2 things happening, so we're rolling 2 dice. But if we were rolling 3 dice, we'd need our table to be 3-dimensional, so then it's not going to work. So they're all useful in different situations. But that's the 3 ways that we can list our sample space.